Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
We are in Deuteronomy chapter 11. This is Moshe, right? The whole book of Deuteronomy is 3 speeches by Moshe to the people before they cross over to inherit the promised land. It is a recitation of their history and of the things that happened, a reiteration of all of that, but with some differences, which scholars point out. This is the beginning of the Deuteronomic history of the Israelites, the book of Deuteronomy, and it goes into Joshua and forward. Reeh, see, Anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. So see, but not in the sense of seeing, but in the way we use it. Look, right? When you say I see, that exists here in biblical Hebrew as well. Re'eh, see, I place before y'all today bracha uklala, blessing and curse. So right away, what we can notice, anyone who's a Hebrew, at all speaker or interpreter sees right away that the re'eh does not match chem. Re'eh is singular, you singular masculine. Re'eh, see, Jew. Anochi noten lifnechem. I am putting before y'all the blessing and the curse. Blessing and curse. All right, so right away, our commentators ask, why? The authors of Torah have to know that doesn't match. So we'll get there. Et habracha asher tishmeu el mitzvot yud hei vav hei Elohechem asher anochi mitzavetchem hayom. All right, so we're continuing from the first idea of I set before y'all blessing and curse. Bracha, when you observe the commandments of yud hei vav hei that I have commanded you today. Vehaklala, and the curse, im lo tishmeu, if you don't listen. If y'all don't observe the mitzvot of Yod Hei Vav Hei, your God, v'sartem min haderech, and you turn from the derech, from the path, from the way, asher anochi mitzavetchem hayom, that I command you this day, lalechet acharei Elohim acherim asher lo yadatem, to walk, to follow after other gods, asher lo yadatem, that y'all have not known, that you did not know, that you don't know. Seems pretty straightforward, pretty simple. The rabbis, our commentators over the millennia, spend a lot of time with these verses and read very carefully into the words as they're chosen, looking first at the re'eh and lifnechem, that they don't match. Any rabbinic commentary anybody want to offer here? Your own. Why doesn't it match? What might be God's message to us? Because it's God's Torah, so obviously there's a message here if it doesn't match.
That the individual or individual actions affect the community.
Oh, okay, Rabbi Witt, thank you. So the individual and how the individual acts actually impacts everybody. Okay.
Yeah, you could say in English, you could say, "See, I put before all Americans," and it would make sense as well based on.
But it doesn't make sense in Hebrew, because in Hebrew you have to choose re'u or re'eh. In English, the command form is not singular or plural.
Maybe
in
this
Hebrew
and that.
It is. So in Hebrew, the choice was made to keep it singular, but make the body plural. That's why it's so remarkable, is because you have to say re'u, see, y'all.
Is this a good case for y'all?
That's the only way to translate the chem part of lifnechem is y'all. Yes, this is always my biblical Hebrew case for y'all. There's not another way to say it that's clear, because you in English is not plural. It can be either. Y'all is very clearly second person plural. Okay. So the rabbis, they go along the lines of what Rabbi Pam Witt just shared with us, that re'eh is addressed to each of us. Every single one of us is responsible. And it's a plurality that we're dealing with. It's a people that we're dealing with. But don't think, Amy, that when God says don't covet, that God is speaking to Justin in this case and not to you, right? Every single one of you is obligated and responsible for observing everything that relates to you as an individual. Some things won't, right? Circumcision doesn't relate to girls. So there's some things that won't relate. But the things that do, each one of you is responsible. And you're a collective, both and. The other one I really like is that the rabbis say, you know what? Don't worry about what Justin's doing. Well, Justin, I saw what he was eating yesterday. Okay, well, that might affect the people and its relationship to the divine. Yes, but that's not your concern, Amy. Reeh. You pay attention to your shopping cart. You pay attention to what you're doing. Don't worry about what Justin's. He'll get his. Just kidding. Right. So, that it can impact the relationship of the collective to the divine, but it's not a reason to observe or not observe any commandment. Is that someone else isn't doing it, or they're doing it better. I could never do it that good, so forget about it. Why even bother? Okay. I love both of those interpretations by the rabbis that this is what we learned from the fact that it doesn't match. All right. The other thing they point out is it's not the exact same language when we talk about bracha and klala. When we talk about bracha, what does it say? Eta bracha asher tishmeu. You'll have bracha, you'll experience bracha asher tishmeu when you observe the commandments of Yod Heh Vav Heh. What does it say about the klala? V'haklala im lo tishmeu. If you don't observe. And the rabbis want to say, which I think, again, this is really beautiful, an interpretation that the rabbis say, for the most part, you're going to do okay. When you observe, when you listen, when you pay attention, when you're doing it, you're going to experience bracha. If you don't, then you'll experience klala. So the if it doesn't say if you observe, you'll experience bracha, right? It says when you observe, you'll experience bracha. And if you choose not to, then you're going to experience the state of klala. All right, Bert?
Can you elaborate on the word observe and what it means in this particular case?
Sure.
It's clearly not to look at, but I mean, is it?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's from our root shin mem ayin, shma. So shma means to listen, to hear, but in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, to listen and to hear God, to listen to God means to obey. It's there in other places, I think, not just God. Yeah. So Abraham is told by God, if you'll recall in Breshit, Shema b'kolah, listen to Sarah's voice. Like, do what she tells you, right? Shema means, in many instances, obey.
Well, in English, we say, listen to your parents, which doesn't necessarily mean with your ears. It means listen to them and then imply to do what they say.
Correct. So in English also, thank you, Bert, we have that valence of when it's a demand or a request that's being expressed, to listen to that means to fulfill it, right? To say yes. But it's sometimes really a part for me. It's a part of Shema for me. When I say Shema, there are times where I'm like, listen up, Aim, right? What would that mean if you really listened for what you're being called into right now? What would that, right? Which is uncomfortable sometimes, right? It's like, because if we're not doing it, why are we not doing it? And we're not doing it because we don't think it's probably best. We're not doing it because I don't want to. It's hard, right? So, all right. So, and if you go, the other thing that the rabbis point to with verse 28 is to go after, lalechet acharei, to walk after Elokim achirim, other gods, asher lo yudatem, that y'all don't know, that y'all haven't experienced. So this is not just apostasy. That is not what the rabbis interpret this to mean. This is not saying you can't go to church and worship Jesus as Christ period. There's an addition. You don't know Jesus as Christ as your God. If you did, you could go to church and worship, presumably. It's not just you can't worship another God. It's worse. If you turn and go after gods you have not experienced, that you are leaving the God who did all of this for you. And if it wasn't for you because they're about to inherit the land and it wasn't they who got redeemed from slavery, it was their parents. But with the witness, the attestation of the generations before you who experienced this God, even if you not so much, right? And you go worship a God that you have no experience of, that is the worst. That is the experience that will bring upon you the experience of klala, of being accursed. And if you think about it, and this is not me being an apologist for the text, I really believe on some level that this is true. When we worship a God we haven't experienced, it's idolatry. So when I want it all to go my way, and if God loved me, and if God was just and good and right and true, then it would be different than it is. So I'm not going to worship that, right? I'm going to worship that God, the one that would make it all better because I'm a good person and I should have it. That's idolatry, according to Jewish tradition. The God you have experienced, Asher Yadatem, the God y'all know, is one that is there and is part of everything, including what is horrible and painful and messy. That's Yud Hey Vav Hey. Reality, capital R. Existence, capital E. Being, capital B. You don't know anything else. Anything else you're making up. And that is not allowed, right? So I actually love this teaching by the rabbis. Asher lo yadatem. Now pay attention. What kind of gods? Acharei Elokim acherim. What is acher? Aleph, chet, resh. Acher, other. When we say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai what? Echad. In a Sefer Torah, how is the Daled written?
Bigger,
right? So you shouldn't be confused between the resh and the Daled because they look very similar. One of the explanations for that scribal tradition is you are saying Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, not Adonai Acher. Okay, remind yourself. Okay,
Amy,
yes?
the walking with God and walking with other, but it's translated as follow here. But isn't that like the same verb, or I think you said, as walking with God? As in, we're told on the other hand in other places in Torah that we need to walk in God's ways. And Mika,
yes.
the
So
prophet,
derech, the derech is the way, the path, which is why halacha is called halacha, right? Jewish law, halacha is halicha, to walk, the way one walks. So that's halacha, the derech. That's why it's called halacha, is because it's how you walk the path.
Yeah, it's a very interesting.
Are how you walk the path.
It's a very interesting metaphor. I always think of it as walking beside God, if I can be anthropomorphic for a second, as opposed to
very liberal Jew of you, Bert. Very liberal Jew. Okay, this is Rabba Dr. Mira, who says the world stands in between two letters, literally. Since the Jewish tradition teaches that the world was created by words, right? When we look at Genesis, Vayehi or, God speaks and light exists. It doesn't have to be that way. We accept the story that way, but it doesn't have to be. God could have dreamed it. God could have wished it. God could have taken God's hands and made it. But that's not what happens. In our text, God speaks. Words and things exist. Since the Jewish tradition teaches that the world was created by words, which are composed of letters, the hidden code behind everything is the Hebrew alphabet. God did not create in Phoenician, right, or in hieroglyphs. God created, of course, in Hebrew. That means everything exists because of, by way of, Aleph through Tav, the Hebrew alphabet. So everything exists, she's saying, between two letters, literally, between Aleph and Tav. In this paradigm, although we can't see it in our everyday life, the deeper level of our world unfolds in the space between the first letter of the alphabet, Aleph, and the last one, Tav. I love thinking about how the Hebrew alphabet is our code for the world, the matrix of our reality. At its core, this idea teaches that reality is much more than the eye can grasp. The title of this week's parsha is Reeh, which means see. And she goes on to talk about the little prince. Aleph, as the Me'orei Naim teaches, she's bringing us teachings from the Me'orei Naim, is not only the first letter of the expression Ein Sof, meaning the infinite, the unending, the without end, which is a mystical name for God. It is also a symbol of Ein Sof itself. The silent letter, the first of the Hebrew alphabet, which comes before the B, the bet of Bereshit, in the beginning, the Torah's first word, becomes a profound metaphor for the divine. In the language of Kabbalah, God, the source of all life, is referred to as the Aleph of the world. In his commentary on Parshat Re'eh, the Me'orei Naim is inviting us this week to see our radical freedom. Our choice to, and notice how she says this word, our choice to reconnect with the life source, which is encapsulated in the letter Aleph, no matter how low we fell. Let's take a look and see how the Me'orei Naim does this. Here's our verse. On the simple level, it would seem like yet another classic stick and carrot discourse. If they heed the commandments, the Israelites are blessed. If they don't, they're cursed. But in his introduction to the Guide of the Perplexed, Rambam, Maimonides, reminds us that the various levels of reading text reflect the level of consciousness of who is reading. The pshat, the simple reading, and this is true for all commentators, they all read pshat as the simple reading, he says, is for the children or the simple-minded. So if we'd like to take a step into a more mature relationship with life source, we'll need to go, right, away from just reward and punishment. How? We do this through shifting from reading these verses in a prescriptive way to reading them in a descriptive way, right? When I read these lines in an amoral way, they appear to be a description of the law of karma, or cause and consequences. If I behave according to life's rules, I will be blessed. This is at the heart of the teachings of Taoism. Nature has its own intrinsic harmony, and human happiness only depends on following the laws of nature instead of going against them. In Jewish language, reality becomes what we call divine will or divine law. It is not a coincidence that the Talmud says truth, another word for reality, is the seal of God. And so it goes, if I align myself with reality, meaning with God, things generally flow more easily. Now, this doesn't mean that my life won't have its challenges and its wounds. In fact, from a Kabbalistic perspective, my soul only came down to this world to do its own tikkun. So challenges are inevitable. Meaning, according to Kabbalah, if you didn't come down here and experience brokenness and do the repair, then your soul wouldn't have to come here at all. If it's all about everything being copacetic, you would stay in the great union of God's mysterious oneness, right? And there's no need to come down here and do all this craziness of LA traffic, right? But struggling against life is optional, right? So the difference between experiencing difficulty and struggling against that difficulty, that's a nuance, but it's an important one. If I go against the laws of nature / reality, if I fight against the reality of life, deaths, illnesses, aging, challenges, I will lose. I will add useless suffering to the inevitable pains that are part of the makeup of life. These are the curses that the Parsha references. This is one of the precious things I've learned over time in mindfulness practice. Choosing a life of blessings doesn't mean being naively unrealistic about life. It means choosing to harmonize myself with the way things are instead of fighting reality. Pain is suffering. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. This is what the blessings and curses in Parshat Re'eh come to remind us. First, we must see the reality before us, right? We have to look. Often we don't want to, right? I don't want to see that mammogram again. Thank you very much. I don't want to. Re'eh, look, see, not just see, but get it. That this is what's happening. You don't have to like it. You don't have to want it. You don't have to think it's great. This is what's happening. If you want to line up with godliness and you want to line up with reality and figure out how to do it, you have to first see and acknowledge and on some level accept that this is reality. Then we recognize that we have a choice. And from there, we are invited to choose. How do we want to live? For the Me'orei Naim, this is an existential stance. He reminds us that at the end of the day, blessings and curses are here to remind us about our free will. He starts by connecting the opening verse of Parshat Re'eh to other similar verses in the book of Deuteronomy. See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. And after this it says there, and you shall choose life. In order to choose, we need to see deeply, even if it hurts. What are we invited to choose? For the Me'orenayim, choosing life means reconnecting to the Aleph, the primordial letter and the source of all life, God. But how do we do that? Through the letters of the alphabet, the Me'orenayim teaches us once again that choosing life means accepting its inevitable descents and ascents. He starts by describing to us the Aleph as a descending letter from Aleph to Tav. Ki noda, it is known that the creation of all the worlds and their fullness came through the Torah, which are the letters, the otiyot, me'aleph to Tav. Right? If God created the world through Torah and through language, well, that means God created the world Aleph through Tav. And that the blessed creator, here we go, watch this move, watch this Kabbalistic move. The blessed creator contracted itself in the letters. Those of you who know Lurianic Kabbalah know that their explanation of the cosmos and of how creation happened is God does tzimtzum. God contracts God's self into God's self to leave room for the universe. God pours God's light back into the universe. There's a cosmic accident, and the vessels created to hold the divine light shatter and become this material world. And within everything material, there is a spark of the divine. This is classic Lurianic Kabbalah. What I want you to, I'm not going to take time to explain that. What I want you to see, which I've never seen before, I've never really heard this before, the Me'orenayim says, if God created the world through Tzimtzum, which we know, because we know Kabbalah, so we know God had to contract, because everything was God. God had to contract so that there was something that wasn't God, so that we could exist. We know that, or else we wouldn't be here. Right? It's a little bit of circular reasoning, but okay, we know God did tzimtzum. Well, what we are not thinking about necessarily is if God created the world through speech and looked through Torah to create the world, which is another midrash, that the Torah is the blueprint of the world. That's all language, which means God did tzimtzum into language. God tzimtzumed God's self into the Aleph Bet. God contracted God's self into Aleph through Tav. Whoa. Okay, so that blew my mind. Because what does it mean if we take seriously for a second that God contracted God's self into Aleph through Tav? Then that means if God is truly in Aleph through Tav, like literally, then what Justin just said is that if you're studying the words, what are you actually doing? You're actually engaging with the words, which means you are praying. Because you're accessing the divinity that is in Aleph through Tav. Right? Like, so for me, it also says, well, then what is language, right? What is language if God contracts God's self existentially into A through Z? I'm not going to say it's just Aleph through Tav, right? Like A through Z. What does that mean about language? Wow. I know we as Jews take what we say very seriously, but what does it mean? Yes, Rachel, that conversation then is a form of prayer. But isn't it also, yes. And like I'm Godding then every time I speak. Like God who created the universe with Aleph through Tav, words that are actually concepts that then come into reality. I'm doing imitatio Dei. I'm imitating God every time I speak, and I am in some fashion creating reality. Right? Am I pushing it, or like this bugged me? I didn't sleep last night. Bert, go ahead.
It makes perfect sense.
Two things. Yeah, I want to just, the Mayor Naim was he from the late 1700s, one of the, is that the gentleman we're talking about? He was a protege, I guess, of the Baal Shem Tov.
Yes.
Okay, that was one. Okay, so if does that mean you were talking about Aleph to Tov? Why traditional Jews say prayer has to be in Hebrew?
Yes.
and right, but they're okay, there's obviously a lot of midrash and other things that say you can pray in any language, but there is a sense that somehow Hebrew, that's what they mean by Hebrew is the holy language. Is that correct?
Yes, that Hebrew is the holy tongue, meaning it's the language of God, and it's the language that God created the world in. So yes, we can pray in English, of course, or in their vernacular, Aramaic. And does it still quote unquote work? Sure. What's best is to pray in the the Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue, God's language. Okay. Susan?
No, it just ties everything together because I've studied Kabbalah. I've thought that, I go in the garden and I eat a piece of lettuce and I'm helping to mend, if I do it mindfully, I'm helping to mend the spheres. But I believe that God spoke and the world came to be. And this is amazing, Amy. This ties it all together. All this stuff I've never been able to put together.
Yay. They didn't hate it. Yay. So the other thing that occurred to me was if language developed actually for us to talk to ourselves, and God is contracted, the divine is contracted into language, is that yet not another way that we are created in the image of the divine? That it's not just my soul, actually. It's the fact that I talk to myself, that is the primary mechanism by which I experience my own reality is through the language, not to speak, the language I use to interpret my world and my existence in it. That is divinity. If God is contracted into letters and language, then when I talk to myself, it's the God of me talking to me. And I think we tend to voice and go with your gut. Let's sit in meditation and let's leave the world of words. It's a both and. And for me, I think this helped me reclaim the incredible power that is human beings experiencing the divinity through talking to ourselves. And that what we say to ourselves actually matters. Listening to what we tell ourselves really matters. Noticing, and this is a lot of what mindfulness practice actually is. It's not about stop the chatter. It's about notice the chatter, notice what it's saying. Instead of just being in it, notice what the chatter is about and what kind of judgy words you're using about your experience. Just notice, because that is a way of accessing the Orion's teaching opened in me. That's a way of accessing revelation that we experience internally. Yes? Because the divine is in the language, is in those words that were invented for us to narrate our own experience to ourselves. All right. So Rachel, you had your hand up. Is it still up? Or did I squash whatever?
No, it's yeah. Can I say something?
Yes.
This really resonated with me today in a lot of different ways. But then what you were saying toward the end about the evolution of speech and language was super powerful. So I took my hand down. So there's just a lot of it that really resonated. But my daughter has been very sick. And yet there was something in there earlier on about, I can't remember it now, but it was just, it's about that somehow it's not about it's not that you're not without struggles. I mean, do you remember that part? Okay.
Yeah.
And that somehow in the last year, I've somehow come to understand, and it is really not something I'm able to put words to, this idea that there is a way to, yes, suffering is optional, right? So, right, it's bad things happen. People have illnesses. It's bad. It's not good. It's painful. You experience pain, and yet the suffering part really is optional. And I don't.
So the suffering, the klala, the Orionai wants to interpret suffering as klala, right? As the experience of being cursed, is when we fight against reality.
Right.
It doesn't mean we don't feel sad or scared or frustrated or angry that our daughter is sick.
Right.
Right. That's not what he means. He means when we fight that,
Right.
when we fight against that, that's
Right.
when we really suffer klala.
Exactly.
Right? If I'm with the pain and I
Right.
turn to people who love me and say, I'm really struggling today, with what's happening for her. I wish
Right.
it weren't so, right? That's not fighting.
Right.
That's acknowledging the pain. And that's part of how we do tikkun, how we repair.
Right. And
Right?
I never
And
used
so
to.
the klala,
Yeah.
it comes when we deny that,
Right.
that it's this way.
The blessings and the curses, I never used to be able to understand how in a moment of something so painful happening, you could still find a blessing and find gratitude. And yet, when my daughter came downstairs 2 weeks ago, crying, and she already had her bag packed. She's only 17. She'll be 18 in a couple of weeks. And she said, you have to take me to the hospital because I'm not okay. That I in that moment of being simultaneously terrified for her safety and well-being, I was also filled with profound gratitude that this young person of only 17 had the wherewithal and the fortitude to hold herself accountable. I cannot explain that. I cannot explain how. So there was this. And I've never understood how you could hold both of those things at the same time.
So that is exactly what the Me'orei 9 says is God's teaching. What you experienced is exactly what the Me'orei 9 says this parsha is coming to tell us.
Exactly. That's exactly.
You can hold both.
Yeah.
The incredible pain of seeing your daughter, in a certain condition that you wish didn't happen to her, and the incredible bracha that is her agency that you helped put in her, that she could say, I'm not okay.
Right. And you can hold them both.
Yes.
And they don't need to be resolved or reconciled, or that you just hold them.
Okay, so Rachel, so thank you. You've just opened up another level, which is, so what Me'orei 9 is saying is not only can you hold both, but klala happens when you don't. It's not the reality that's bracha or klala. It's not the situation that's bracha or klala, which is what we tend to think. A life without klala means a life without cancer. That's not true.
It's
the
not reality.
truth is right here. The truth is bracha is when you confront the reality that human beings get sick. And people we love and wish we could protect with everything we have get sick and suffer and are in pain.
Yep.
Sometimes agony.
Yep.
Facing that and then dealing with that, the both end of that is the state of bracha.
Yep.
Bracha doesn't always feel good. And I think this is what, yes, you're helping us get to is, how I feel about spiritual junk food. You know what I mean? That if it feels good, like all that garbage about create a beautiful day. Oh my God. So just, right. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes reality is ugly and it's not going to be a beautiful day. Can I show up anyway?
Right.
My truest self to a really shitty day.
Yep.
Right? And that is the state of bracha.
Yeah.
Not that everything's going well or feels good or is what I wanted. That is not curse or blessing. Bracha is showing up for what is.
Yeah, exactly.
Pam?
I was thinking about Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue or language, and it sounded like maybe you're lumping all languages in with Lashon HaKodesh. And I just want to say, I know I'm not telling you anything new, Amy, but for our class who may not know, there are some special things about the Hebrew language, like each letter is a word, and it's also a pictograph, and it's also a number. One of my favorites to think about is the letter Vav, which gets translated as and it's in front of so many openings of passages. And the letter Vav actually means hook, and it's literally hooking together two concepts. So the word actually means what it does. And this happens over and over in Lashon HaKodesh. And I don't think that's true of any other language, that the letters mean what that they even have a meaning, that the letters even have a meaning. We don't have that in English. A doesn't mean anything.
Okay, so the anthropologist in me is going to push back,
okay,
and say that's not true. All letters come from pictographs. All of them had names. The picture was of an object, and the word for that letter meant that object and what that object functioned as. That's how all letters come to be. Yes, because English is not the original language, right? English is not a language that derives from pictures, right? It goes through a lot of transformation. It comes out of Latin. Latin were numbers. Roman numerals are numbers. If I make a grocery list, it's A, get eggs, B, get toast, C, get milk, right? Letters serve as numbers in English also. So, and in Roman numerals. So it's there. What differentiates, I will give you that what differentiates Lashon HaKodesh is that our people has read into all of these letters in a way that makes them love letters, and a love letter from God in Torah in a way that I'm not sure other languages have, about their origin and about their possible meanings. But I know, having lived in northern Minnesota, Ojibwe language, the Anishinaabe people are very attached to their language and how it expresses reality differently than English ever could, right? If you say something in Ojibwe, it is very different than saying it in translation in English. And for them, that's their Lashon HaKodesh. That's their sacred language.
Our Bible is written in Lashon HaKodesh.
I'm going to say it again.
Our Torah is written in Lashon HaKodesh. It conceivably could have been in any language, but it was in Lashon HaKodesh. I think it's something special. And on a little different topic, you were talking about the Sod level, and I was just thinking about that last night, that why God would include a secret or a hidden level into our Torah. And I thought, when I've studied Kabbalah, it's been so esoteric for me. I don't really understand a lot of it. And I thought maybe I should just stick to the Peshat. But now I'm getting to the place where maybe I could learn a little more esoteric. And especially now, you just said the Rambam says the Peshat is for children and dummies, basically. So what's your feeling on why is the Sod level even there?
Why is the Sod, the secret level, even there?
Yeah.
Because we put it there. Because we continue as a people to read new understandings of truth and experience and existence. We continue to read it back into our text. We don't develop a whole new text. We don't develop a New Testament. We continue to read new ideas back into the old text and call it was always there. We're very clever.
So you don't think there's really a secret level?
And no.
Okay. All right. Interesting. All right.
No, I shouldn't say that. I believe if God is contracted into language, then there are multiple layers of truth in the language of Torah. But that's not different from Ojibwe. That the Ojibwe spiritual people, leaders, could read into their texts much of their experience that happened after those texts were created and read it back in, right? And that is just as special to them as Hebrew is to us. Okay. Lisa?
Well, I was just going to say, I'm kind of fascinated by your saying that all letters originally come from pictographs, no matter what the language. But the thing is, not all languages end up having a written language. I mean,
Correct.
They have never found a written language, from my anthropology research, in the United States of Native Americans. I mean, they have a very developed language, but it's not a written language. It's written in pictographs. So We do. We put so much emphasis on this written language, and that what we believe develops from literally that writing. That's a very different concept than other peoples in the world who got as far as pictographs, perhaps, but their concept of the world moves in a different direction than the written language.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that corrective, that we already have a bias towards an alphabet, right? Which is fairly new. Like the alphabet starts with the Phoenicians. So it's really new in human experience, to your point, right? It's brand new. If you look at existence, it is brand spanking new, this idea of letters for sounds and those sounds representing concepts. Like so, and that it's not the best, highest form of linguistic expression, which is important that you remind us that some languages remain oral and traditions remain oral, and you're not allowed to write them down. For some languages, right, to write them down is already to denigrate them and to simplify them, that it's supposed to be communicated between people, not put down on, God forbid, a piece of paper. That is, cheapening the language.
Well, it's kind of a cultural relativism that.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ethnocentricity. Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Do you know, we talk about codes?
What codes?
The codes.
Yes. But who's we? Who's we? Okay.
We.
Who's we?
You.
So I have been exposed to that process. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. It can be 100%. So first of all, I want a friendly amendment. I want to disconnect Kabbalah and Orthodoxy. They are not synonymous.
No, I don't.
And they're not, because you said Kabbalah, Orthodox.
Well, they both.
Right? But that's not for Kabbalists. What I hear you talking about is taking the letters and their value, analyzing the value of each letter, meaning the numerical value, and then they compare that to other words with that same numerical value, which is called gematria. So, but also there's like lots of different names for God, and then you can work with those. That's part of medieval. A lot of medieval practice was about using the names of God for magical purposes.
I was actually
the gematria.
No.
Okay.
Clearly.
Okay. So we'll talk offline. Okay. Buy me dinner and we'll talk about it. All right. So I guess what I want to leave us with, is this idea that we, out of love, choose to read back into these texts knowledge, experience, philosophy that we come to through exposure to other ways of thinking and other traditions in the world. Maimonides doesn't come to this stuff by himself. He comes to this as a neo-Aristotelian. He comes to this through Neoplatonism and Neo-Aristotelianism, right? So he's exposed to that philosophy. He reads that back into Torah. I think what I want to take from this, the Hiddush for me and the Ruta partner that we were so excited about and why I wanted to bring it to you, is this idea that language, if God does tzimtzum, if God contracts God's self into language, what would it mean for us to take that a little seriously? That how we talk to ourselves, what we say, that we're godding and someone put it in the chat, I think it was Susan, we create worlds when we speak. When we speak to children, we create their sense of self. When I speak to Luna, I know she resonates deeply with what the nonverbal communication I'm making with her. I can see it, right? In the position of her ears and her eyebrows. It lands and forms her reality. That is power. And I want to see that as a privilege. I want to see that as a responsibility, and want to really acknowledge that that language has the capacity to be expressive of all of it, capital A, and how fortunate we are to be beings that have the capacity for language, and may we use it wisely, lovingly, and responsibly. Shabbat Shalom.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.